I'm Manu Savani, a lecturer in public policy at Brunel University London. My research looks at the behavioural biases that can affect our decision making. I use experiments to investigate people's health and political behaviours in particular, and I use a mix of statistical and qualitative data. To give you some examples, in past work I've investigated whether commitment contracts help people reach their health goals. And more recently, I've looked at what makes people more willing to support vaccine take-up policies. Pre-registration is a way of setting out your stall before carrying out your research. You explain some of your deliberate research choices, for example, your research question, perhaps some hypotheses, how you will collect and analyse your data. You then post that information to a public site, such as the Open Science Framework, and then you get on with the fun bit, gathering the data and analysing it. It is possible to register your study after it has begun, and that's called retrospective registration. And much of what I'll talk about today applies to that as well. But where possible, it's that bit better to pre-register your study. The merits of pre-registering studies is really about promoting transparency in research. Pre-registration helps to address the publication bias problem, where we see studies with larger impact and perhaps a more straightforward result story get published, while lots of other studies that might have null or so-called boring results relegated to a sad folder on your computer. Pre-registration means we have a better sense of all the investigations and studies that were initiated. Pre-registration can also help to make a distinction between research that tests theory and specific hypotheses, and research that explores and discovers new insights which have yet to be replicated in other work. That's particularly helpful to minimise fishing, which is where someone tries lots of different analysis techniques until they get the result they wanted. Phishing, harking, and p-hacking can overstate the strength and importance of the findings, and that does not contribute to good science or to good policy evidence for decision makers. Pre-registration only requires you to set down on paper what you want to do, as far as you know this in the early stages of your project, so it shouldn't tie your hands. The chances are, if your research is funded, you've already planned in some detail your research design. You will have had to complete the grant application. So you will have committed already to certain research questions, a particular data source or data collection approach, perhaps a theoretical framework. You can bring all of that in and make your pre-registration more or less detailed accordingly. If you visit a repository like the Open Science Framework, you'll find a variety of studies, including field experiments, online survey experiments, meta-analyses and systematic reviews, and qualitative studies that rely on interview data, qualitative coding, and thematic analysis. It really can be useful to researchers from any disciplinary background using any research design. So let's say you discover something you weren't setting out to find. This was something that came up in my research on health behaviour change. In a study on commitment contracts, I ran the analysis that I had planned in advance, but then looking at the data, I also came upon other relationships and possible mechanisms at work, which my theory was silent on. I brought this to light in my write-up and was able to publish these as important exploratory findings alongside my main results. So to be really clear, you can publish findings that were not in your pre-registration, but you just want to specify what was discovered organically rather than sought out. Making that distinction can increase the credibility of your work with peer reviewers and a wider audience. And it gives you protection against any criticisms that you went fishing for the results. Exploratory findings can be super valuable, but by flagging that you came upon this, you're saying that this needs further testing, replication, confirmation to give us more confidence that the findings are reliable, that they can be found in other data too. There is flexibility built in. Pre-registering doesn't mean that you don't explore the data or that you don't discuss any unexpected findings that emerge. It simply means that you differentiate between the confirmatory findings that you set out to test and the unexpected insights you might discover in your data. In fact, in your pre-analysis plan, you can set out what are you deliberately looking for and also list some potential exploratory analysis you might conduct if the results do not conform to theory. Say you're running an experiment and you get a null result, meaning there appears not to be a finding where you expected one. Then examining the data further can be really helpful to develop theory and perhaps correct our prior assumptions, essentially to better understand why this unexpected result. That's a key part of generating knowledge. The pre-registration process does not take away from any of that. In fact, it might give you extra credence if you specify in your pre-registration that, in the case of a null result, here's how you will explore the data for more answers. Pre-registering is an easy process. All you need to pull together are the kind of study details you're likely to have to hand anyway. A research question, a theory that sets up some hypotheses, plans for data collection, techniques for analysis. Choose an online registry where you want to post your study. A popular one is the Open Science Framework, which is what I use in my work. The best way for me to explain further is to show you on the screen. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the OSF registry. That stands for the Open Science Framework. It's a reputable and user-friendly registry. So this is the registry homepage, and you can see already in a little snapshot just the range of disciplines where pre-registration is used. So the studies mentioned here include economics, ecology, education, and psychology, and there are many others. You can use the search engine to browse a topic or research area or by author. I'm going to bring up a study that I have registered. So here's a registered study and what the public see. With the information we provided, you can see there's the title of the study, a brief description, the authors, and we've also said a little bit about what we're investigating, when, and how. What are the key features of our research design? What are our hypotheses? How do we plan to collect the data and how much of it? So that's the public view of a pre-registered study. You also get a formal DOI, which is useful for sharing and signposting your work even while it is in progress. It can make the endeavour feel more concrete while you're waiting for the data to come through. To prepare a registration at OSF, here's what you need to do. First, from the homepage, osf.io, you need to sign up to the site. Once you've signed up, you can log in, and then you can view your personal dashboard. This helps you manage your studies and documents. The OSF has resources to help you begin, edit, and submit your registration, as you can see here. This is the OSF support page. One of the best things here are the templates. There's a really handy decision tree to help you choose which template is best for you. And as you can see, this process is not just for quantitative studies. There's a template for qualitative studies as well. It's also not just for experiments. There's a pre-registration template for secondary data too. When you're ready, come through to add new registrations. You'll be guided through questions like this. Are you adding content to an existing study or starting a new one from scratch? And which template do you want to use? And you go from there. Before you begin to create your draft, my advice is to have to hand the metadata of your study: a title, brief author details, a research question and outcome of interest, perhaps a few hypotheses, and a description of the research design, for example. It's also good practice to upload a pre-analysis plan. A pre-analysis plan sets out what you intend to do with the data when it's gathered. How will you organise it and how will you analyse it? Here's the pre-analysis plan associated with the study I showed you earlier on political scandal. Again, there are templates for this on OSF. I recommend you browse the registry for pre-analysis plans in your field and see what fits best with your work. You can include more or less detail, and this will depend on the conventions in your field and also the target journals you have in mind. Earlier, I spoke about the flexibility to include exploratory analysis. Here is an example of this. In this study, my co-author and I specified that if we were to obtain a null result, we would undertake a couple of strategies to try and understand this further. We were going to drill deeper to find out what was going on. In the event, we did not need to use these strategies as we confirmed our hypothesis as expected. And we still have the freedom to go beyond the hypotheses and discover new things in our data, even with a pre-analysis plan in place. In fact, we intend to do so with this very data set. Watch this space. That's pre-registration in a nutshell. I hope you found it useful and you give pre-registration a try.